Welcome, sons and daughters. Today I have a message straight from my sacred heart for you. I, as your mother, have seen the pains you've endured. I have witnessed your afflictions, and at this moment I want to share something important that is about to happen in the world. So, from now on, listen carefully to my voice and do not let anything distract you. Now, I will begin revealing what is about to happen. This might be your last opportunity to escape what is coming. Something very serious and profound has been revealed, and I cannot allow you to remain unaware. The last message of the Virgin Mary was delivered with a clear purpose: to prepare the chosen ones for dark times. If you are watching this video, it is because you have been chosen to receive this message now. But pay close attention. Not everyone will understand. Not everyone is ready. Only those with strong spirits and open hearts will be prepared. You may be wondering why it is so important to watch this video until the end. It's simple. If you don't listen to everything that will be revealed, you will be ignoring a crucial warning, and the consequences may be devastating. It's not just about curiosity, it's about protection, faith, and being prepared for something much bigger that is already happening right now, and you need to know before it's too late. First, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to this channel, because here I'll be sharing a prophetic message for your heart every day. Don't forget to comment below with your prayer request, telling me who you've been praying for in recent days. Your family, friends, for work, for healing. Share your prayer request below, and along with your request, let me know what country you are from so we can see how far our message is reaching. Amen. The Virgin Mary warns us about the importance of preparing ourselves through powerful prayers to achieve protection and salvation for our lives. So download my digital book, The Powerful Prayer of the Virgin Mary, now. This material covers a variety of prayers suitable for every occasion in life. Don't waste time. Click the link available in the pinned comment and download it immediately. Copies are limited, so it is crucial to act now to ensure access to the powerful prayer of the Virgin Mary before the units run out. Make sure to get your copy from the first pinned comment. It's important to pay attention to the Virgin Mary's warnings and prepare yourself for the great storm that is coming. Don't think this is just another religious message. What's about to be revealed here is not for everyone. It's for those few who still believe, for those who know the world is changing and feel deep in their soul that something big is about to happen. If you're here, it's because this message is meant for you. And let me be clear, not watching until the end could cost you much more than you imagine. This is an urgent message, and it's not just advice, it's a calling. The Virgin Mary has sent us a warning, and ignoring it could be the biggest mistake of your life. Are you ready to know what's coming? Are you ready to discover how to protect yourself from what is about to happen? Before we continue, I need you to make a decision. Watch until the end and prepare yourself, or risk being completely unprotected. What is at the core of this revelation will not be limited by borders. The shadow of what is to come will spread far beyond, and only those who listen to every word carefully will have a chance to face what lies ahead. I know what I am saying may sound heavy, but when the Virgin Mary appeared with this final message, she was clear. Hard times are approaching. The fate of many is at stake, and only those who are spiritually prepared will have the strength to face the challenges ahead. Her warning was not vague, and her words still echo today. Prepare, seek refuge in faith, and do not ignore the signs. I want to help you understand what this warning means. But for that, you need to pay attention until the end of this video. Every word is crucial. Every detail could make the difference between being protected or vulnerable. Imagine a silent war, political pressures and spiritual trials. These are not predictions. They are realities that have already begun to unfold, and you need to be ready. Don't ignore what will be said. Your spiritual and emotional protection depends on it. Now stop what you are doing and focus. If you've made it this far, it's not a coincidence. This is the decisive moment. Click the subscribe button to ensure you'll receive more of these revelations before it's too late. Leave in the comments the name of the person you want to protect with the powerful prayers we'll be sharing. Don't leave now. Don't get distracted. What's coming could change everything. This is your last chance. Prepare yourself because the Virgin Mary's last message begins now. Before we continue, I'd like to make a special request for all of you, something that has become a tradition on our channel. Share in the comments where you're watching from. It's incredible for us to see how far our messages are reaching and how they are connecting people from all around the world. So tell us the name of your city, your country, or that special place from where you're joining us. We love feeling that connection, knowing that even though we are far apart, we are all together. Now that you know how urgent and important what is to be revealed is, let's dive even deeper. What you will hear here is not a common message. This is a direct and extraordinary revelation. We are talking about the Virgin Mary's last message, sent to warn those who are spiritually ready. And if you're here, it's because something bigger has brought you to this moment. This is no coincidence. It's essential that you understand this message is not for everyone. Only those with a receptive heart and an open soul will be able to absorb the depth of what is being said. And it's not because this revelation is inaccessible or elitist. On the contrary, the Virgin Mary has always spoken to all her children, but unfortunately, not everyone is prepared to listen. The world is full of distractions, and only those who can quiet their minds and focus on what really matters will understand. This message was sent specifically for you, who are seeking answers, protection, and guidance. It's no coincidence that you feel in your heart that something is changing, that things aren't the same as they used to be. The signs are everywhere, and Mary has warned us that times of great tribulation are approaching. Do you realize how this is already touching your spirit? That feeling that something bigger is happening, something that goes beyond our everyday concerns. We're not talking about trivial problems, but about challenges that can completely change the course of your life and the lives of those you love. You need to be ready. The Virgin Mary, in her infinite wisdom and compassion, has always been a powerful guide for all her children. She appears in times of crisis to warn, protect, and bring hope. Her last message came at a critical moment, and you were chosen to receive it now because time is short. We are facing a revelation that cannot be ignored. Those who listen and act will be protected. Those who ignore it may face very serious consequences. This video is just the beginning of this journey. Today, you are being invited to prepare your spirit, strengthen your faith, and join those who are also ready to listen. What is to come cannot be faced alone. Faith and unity are our greatest weapons against the forces that will try to destabilize us, and that's exactly why you're here. If you've made it this far, it means your soul is seeking something deeper. You're looking for answers, and those answers will be given, but only to those who are ready to receive them with humility and devotion. The Virgin Mary knows what's coming and wants her children to be protected, ready to face any challenge that arises. But remember, this message is not about fear. It's about hope, protection, and preparation. Mary gives us the chance to be one step ahead, to understand what's coming, and to prepare spiritually. This is the time to strengthen your faith, to seek connection with the divine, and not to ignore the signs. As you listen to each word of this revelation, I want you to remember why you're here. It wasn't by chance. Believing in something greater, in a spiritual force that guides and protects us, is what can make all the difference in the most difficult moments. Pay attention. The words that follow are deep and powerful. They cannot be forgotten or brushed aside because, for those who listen and believe, there is hope and salvation. For those who ignore, the trials will be much harder to bear. Stay with an open mind, a receptive heart, and a focused spirit. What you are about to hear could change the course of your life and offer a new perspective for the challenging days ahead. The revelation continues. Imagine a peaceful night in a forgotten corner of Mexico where the warm desert wind blew softly, carrying the scent of night flowers. Inside a small church, the lights flickered faintly, and the atmosphere of deep devotion was filled with an indescribable spiritual energy. Suddenly, the altar began to emit a soft, almost ethereal light, a light that no one there had ever seen before. The heavenly glow filled the small church, and everyone felt that something supernatural was about to happen. It was a light that brought an infinite sense of peace, but also carried a mystery so deep that it seemed to touch the soul of every person present. The faithful, not knowing exactly what they were witnessing, were in awe. Their eyes, once focused on their prayers, were now fixed on the altar from which this powerful light was emanating. The air was almost electric. Time seemed to have stopped, and everyone felt the spiritual weight of that moment. What was happening there was not something ordinary, it was a miracle, and they all knew it. As the light filled the space, a figure began to form. The Virgin Mary appeared, floating gently above the altar, surrounded by an aura of serenity and power. Her eyes shone with a mix of compassion and sadness, as if she were carrying the weight of all humanity in her heart. Her presence was so powerful that the faithful, gripped by a reverence they had never before experienced, fell to their knees. They knew they were in the presence of something divine, but it wasn't just her appearance that was impressive. There was something more, something that went beyond what they could see. The air vibrated with an unknown energy, something that touched the hearts and minds of everyone present. This was a moment of transcendence, where the divine and the earthly met. It was as if the veil separating the spiritual world from the physical had been momentarily lifted, and everyone could feel the presence of something much greater. With a gentle gesture, the Holy Mother raised her hand. The simple movement brought with it a wave of peace that swept through the small temple. Her voice, when she began to speak, was sweet but carried a depth that penetrated the soul. Everyone knew that her words were not ordinary. They carried a power, a spiritual weight that was impossible to ignore. At that moment, the faithful understood that they were being blessed with a revelation. Something very important was about to be said, something that required their full attention. The church walls seemed to vibrate with the energy of that moment. Every word, every look, every movement from the Virgin Mary carried a deep message. What she was about to say would forever change the lives of everyone present. Can you imagine the intensity of that moment? The presence of the Virgin Mary filled the place with a mix of serenity and solemnity. There was no room for doubt or hesitation anymore. Everyone knew they were experiencing something that many would never have the chance to witness. They were receiving a direct message from heaven, and now you too are being invited to witness this revelation. What was said that night is about to be shared with you, word for word. But before we continue, I need to ask you something. Stay until the end, because every detail is important. Every word carries a deep meaning, and you cannot afford to miss any of it. Keep listening and prepare yourself, because what you're about to hear is not a story to be forgotten. It's a calling that will touch your spirit in the same way it touched the hearts of the faithful in that small church in Mexico. The revelation you are about to hear has the power to transform not only your life, but also the way you see the world. The Virgin Mary appeared that night for a reason, and her message is not just for those who were present, it is for you. The Virgin Mary's presence in that small church was almost indescribable. Her body floated above the altar, bathed in a light so intense that it seemed to come from another world. It was a perfect blend of compassion and sorrow that radiated from her eyes, as if she were carrying the weight of countless souls. The faithful could barely breathe. The air was heavy with a spiritual energy they had never experienced before. They knew somehow that this was a divine moment. Mary was there, present, just as she had been in so many other moments of great crisis in human history. But this time, her message would be different. It was a warning, a call for everyone to prepare for something that was about to happen, something that could shake the foundations not only of that small community, but of entire nations. The silence was absolute. The murmurs of prayers and whispers of devotion were quickly replaced by a paralyzing reverence. The faithful, who had instinctively knelt, did not dare even raise their eyes. Without looking directly, they could feel the powerful aura that emanated from the Holy Mother. Her hands were slightly raised, as if offering both protection and warning. Everyone felt deep within their hearts that what she was about to say next would change their lives forever. Slowly, the voice of Mary filled the space, and it was unlike anything they had ever heard before. It was soft, but carried a nearly palpable spiritual force. It wasn't a common voice. It penetrated beyond their ears, reaching directly into the hearts and souls of every person present. The impact of her words would be felt long after that night. "My dear children," she began, "challenging times are at our door. What is coming will test your faith in ways you could never imagine." Her words resonated in the silence, each one heavy with deep truth. Everyone knew that the Virgin Mary was not there to offer superficial comfort. She was there to prepare and warn about what was to come. Mary paused, and the church, already immersed in an atmosphere of reverence, grew even more silent. Each person present felt the invisible weight of her words, as if each one was being etched directly onto their souls. They knew that something monumental was coming, and it was impossible to ignore the gravity of the situation. Her eyes, filled with profound compassion and sorrow, swept over the small group of faithful. "The world as you know it is about to change," she continued in a clear, firm voice. "The events that are approaching will shake nations, and many will be tested." She spoke with such clarity that there was no room for doubt. The times ahead would be filled with tribulations, and those who were not spiritually prepared could crumble under the weight of these challenges. What Mary said next caused the hearts of everyone to freeze for a moment. "Mexico will be tested," she announced, and her words echoed throughout the church as a wave of fear and reverence swept through the room. "The forces that are moving in the shadows cannot be contained by human hands," she warned. "But those who hold fast to their faith, those who seek refuge in God and in me, will be protected." The silence that followed was almost suffocating. Everyone knew that Mexico was about to face a great trial, but it wasn't just a physical one. Mary spoke of a storm that was approaching, not only in a literal sense, but a spiritual storm, something that would change everyone's lives. She warned that the coming months would bring great challenges and that many would not understand what was happening. These would be times when the faith of everyone would be tested to the utmost, and only those who turned to prayer and spirituality would be able to withstand what was to come. The faithful were overwhelmed with a mixture of emotions. While they felt fear at what Mary had announced, they also felt a certain relief, knowing that they had been given time to prepare. They understood that the Virgin Mary's warning wasn't just a simple alert. It was an opportunity to strengthen their spirits and ready themselves for the difficult times ahead. Mary made it clear. This was the moment to reconnect with the divine, to seek refuge in prayer, and to prepare spiritually. From that point on, the choices that each person made would make all the difference. Those who ignored the call might not survive the trials that were coming. As she spoke, the eyes of the faithful filled with tears. They didn't know all the details of what was to come, but they knew that the Virgin Mary, in her infinite wisdom, was there to guide them. Her message was clear: prepare. The atmosphere within that small church in Mexico was charged with indescribable emotion. The faithful, still kneeling, felt the weight of every word spoken by the Virgin Mary, who floated above the altar like a celestial presence. But the peace that her appearance had brought soon gave way to a warning that no one there was prepared to hear. The silence, already intense, became almost unbearable. Every person there knew deep in their hearts that what was about to be revealed would be a truth hard to face. "Challenging times are at our door," said the Virgin Mary, her voice gentle but carrying the weight of an urgent warning. "What is coming will not be easy. The trials you will face will test your faith and your unity like never before." The words of the Virgin Mary resonated with an intensity that filled the small church. Everyone present felt deep within their hearts that what she was announcing was not just a simple warning. It was something greater, something that would shake the foundations of their faith and their lives. Mary continued, "The foundations of this nation will be shaken in ways that many cannot even imagine." Those words sparked palpable anxiety among the faithful. Some began to glance at each other, trying to process what it really meant. The trials that Mary was announcing would not be ordinary challenges. It wasn't just about physical conflicts or natural disasters, but something much deeper, something that would affect not only Mexico, but the entire world. The Virgin Mary paused for a moment, and in that silence, emotions mixed between fear, reverence, and faith. "The storms that are coming," she continued, "are not just physical. I am not only speaking of visible disasters. The spiritual storms are brewing, and these are even more dangerous, for you will not see them coming, but you will feel them deeply in your soul." The tone of her voice shifted slightly, as if she wanted to ensure that each person present truly understood the seriousness of what she was saying. "What is coming will test your hearts, your spirits. These will not be challenges that can be faced with physical strength, but with unwavering faith," said Mary, as the air in the church seemed to grow denser, filled with an almost suffocating solemnity. The faces of the faithful reflected fear, reverence, and some, with their eyes closed, were already in silent prayer, as if the words of the Virgin had already awakened in them an urgent need to reconnect with their spirituality. The forces that Mary described were not visible, but they moved silently, seeking to weaken souls and divide people. "The forces that are in motion now cannot be faced with earthly actions alone," continued Mary. "Only those deeply connected to God will be able to withstand what is coming." The seriousness of her words made each person feel the weight of their own faith. This was not a message that could be ignored or underestimated. And then, the darkest warning came. Mexico will face moments of great suffering, and it will not be alone. A powerful nation will rise against it, not with weapons, but with invisible and silent forces. The impact of those words fell like a stone on the hearts of the faithful. A great nation, driven by hidden interests, would act against Mexico in ways that many would not perceive until it was too late. "You must prepare yourselves," said Mary, with a gravity that few had ever felt before. The air in the small church seemed to cool, and the light from the candles, which had once illuminated the place with serenity, now seemed to reflect the seriousness of the moment. "Prayer will be your greatest weapon," she explained. "Only through prayer and a deep communion with God and me will you find peace amidst the storms that are coming." The trials would not only be physical, but also spiritual. The challenges ahead would test the faith of each person and their ability to remain steadfast in the midst of darkness. Mary explained that many would try to find answers in worldly solutions, but only those who trusted in the power of prayer and spirituality would be able to resist the pressures that were approaching. Then came the most chilling warning of all. Mexico will be tested, and what is to come will affect every level of life, announced Mary, her voice filling the space. But those who seek refuge in faith, those who remain steadfast in prayer, will be protected. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. The faithful understood that Mary's words were not just a warning for them, but for all of Mexico. The entire country would face a spiritual and material crisis, and those who were not spiritually prepared could be swept away by the storm. Mary spoke of a great nation that, while not attacking with visible weapons, would make its presence and power felt in subtle but devastating ways. The forces moving in the shadows cannot be contained by human hands, she explained. Only those who seek refuge in God and in me will be safe. The fear that had gripped the hearts of the faithful was palpable, but Mary, in her immense wisdom, reminded them that prayer would be their greatest shield. Through prayer, you will find the strength you need, she assured them. And when the darkness seems at its deepest, remember that you are not alone. I am with you. Her words brought not only warnings, but also deep comfort. They were not alone in this battle. Each one of them could find protection, but they had to act now. They had to prepare spiritually, stay in communion with God, and pray without ceasing. What is coming is not something you can face alone, Mary warned. Faith will be your greatest shield. Only those who maintain their faith and unshakable hope will be able to resist. With those words, the faithful understood that what lay ahead would not be easy, but it would not be impossible to face as long as they held on to their faith. With tears in their eyes and their hearts heavy with the Virgin Mary's warning, the faithful knew they had a chance to prepare. The Virgin Mary had given them a clear warning. Times of trial and tribulation were approaching, but she had also given them a promise of protection. The atmosphere in the church was still heavy with the weight of the Virgin Mary's words. The faithful, though shaken, felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had been given a warning, but also a gift, the opportunity to prepare, to strengthen their faith, and to find protection under Mary's guidance. They knew that from this moment on, their lives would be different, marked by the knowledge that something much greater was on the horizon. After what felt like an eternity of silence, one of the elders of the congregation stood up. His voice trembled, but his resolve was clear. "We have been blessed tonight," he said, looking around at the faces of the people who shared the same awe and fear. "The Holy Mother has given us a chance, a call to prepare, and we must not waste it. Starting now, we must unite in prayer, and we must keep our faith stronger than ever." Others in the congregation nodded, and slowly, one by one, they rose to their feet. They felt the urgency in his words, the gravity of their situation, but also the hope that came with knowing they were not alone in this battle. The Virgin Mary was with them, and she had not only warned them, but had given them the tools to protect themselves. The elder continued, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "What is coming will test us, yes, but it will also unite us if we stay true to our faith. We must pray, we must seek refuge in the divine, and we must stand together. For it is only through prayer, unity, and unwavering faith that we will find the strength to face these trials." From that night forward, the small community began to change. People who had once been distant or isolated from one another now gathered daily for prayer. Their homes became sanctuaries of faith, and their lives were centered around the spiritual preparation Mary had urged them to undertake. They prayed not just for themselves, but for their families, their neighbors, their country, and the world. They prayed for the strength to face the trials that were coming and for the protection that Mary had promised to those who stayed faithful. Days turned into weeks, and the community's bond grew stronger. Despite the looming sense of uncertainty, there was also a deep sense of peace among them. They knew the storm was coming, but they also knew they had been given the grace to withstand it. Their faith gave them courage, and their prayers gave them hope. Outside the church, however, things in the world seemed to be unraveling. News of political unrest, social divisions, and growing tensions filled the airwaves. It was clear that the spiritual battle Mary had spoken of was beginning to manifest in the physical world. People across the country were struggling with fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and many did not understand why things were happening the way they were. But the faithful who had heard Mary's message understood. They knew that the forces moving in the shadows were not merely political or economic, they were spiritual, and they could only be countered by faith and prayer. They remained calm, even as others around them grew anxious and fearful. And slowly, more people began to come to them, seeking guidance, seeking comfort, and seeking the peace that they had found in their devotion. The small church that had been the site of Mary's appearance became a beacon of hope. People from nearby towns and villages traveled to join in prayer, to feel the presence of the divine that seemed to fill the air in that sacred space. And the community welcomed them, sharing the message of the Virgin Mary and inviting them to join in their preparations. But the trials were not limited to spiritual battles. As Mary had warned, Mexico began to face tangible challenges as well. Economic difficulties, natural disasters, and growing unrest shook the nation. It was as if the storm Mary had predicted was now fully upon them, and many who had not been prepared were overwhelmed by its force. Yet in the midst of it all, the faithful community remained strong. They had heeded Mary's call to prepare, and their spiritual resilience gave them the strength to endure. In the face of these challenges, the community's faith did not waver. They continued to gather for prayer, and each time they did, they felt the presence of Mary more strongly, as if she was with them, guiding them through the storm. They knew that as difficult as things might become, they had been given the protection of the Holy Mother, and that gave them the courage to keep going. The community leaders took on the role of spiritual guides, helping others to understand that the trials they were facing were part of the purification process that Mary had spoken about. This is not the end, they reminded people. It is a time of testing, but also a time of renewal. We are being called to purify our souls, to let go of the distractions and sins that keep us from God, and to strengthen our connection to the divine. Their words resonated deeply with those who had come seeking refuge. Slowly, more and more people began to embrace the message of the Virgin Mary, and what had started as a small group of faithful grew into a much larger movement. People from across Mexico and even beyond its borders began to unite in prayer, drawing strength from their faith and from the promise that they were not alone in this battle. The trials continued, but so did the prayers. The faithful knew that what they were enduring was only temporary, that the darkness would eventually give way to light. Mary had promised them that those who stayed true to their faith would be protected, and they held on to that promise with all their hearts. As time went on, the community began to see small signs of hope. The storms that had once seemed so overwhelming began to calm, and the peace that had been so elusive started to return. It was not an easy process, but the faithful knew that they had come through the worst of it because they had remained steadfast in their faith. And so, as the world slowly began to heal, the community continued to pray, to guide others, and to share the message of the Virgin Mary. They knew that the trials were not over, but they also knew that they had been given everything they needed to face whatever came next. The faithful would always remember that night when Mary had appeared to them, not just as a moment of divine intervention, but as the beginning of a journey, a journey of faith, of hope, and of spiritual renewal. And they knew that as long as they remained true to that journey, they would never walk alone. The faithful community, now stronger than ever, continued to walk their path of faith with unwavering resolve. The memories of that night, when the Virgin Mary had appeared and shared her prophetic message, remained vivid in their hearts and minds. They saw every trial as part of the journey that Mary had warned them about, but they also felt a deep sense of gratitude. They had been given the opportunity to prepare, and they had done so through prayer, unity, and a shared commitment to the divine mission they were called to fulfill. As the months passed, more people joined their movement. The original small group of believers had expanded beyond their town, reaching communities across Mexico and even further. The faithful had become spiritual guides to others who, feeling the weight of the trials around them, sought solace and understanding. The message of the Virgin Mary, one of preparation, faith, and protection, had spread far and wide. The world, still in turmoil, seemed to be slowly shifting. It wasn't that the challenges had disappeared entirely, but the hearts of many had been fortified through prayer and a renewed sense of purpose. The economic, political, and spiritual storms that had shaken the nation had begun to subside, but not without leaving a lasting mark. People were more aware now, more alert to the signs that Mary had spoken about. They understood that this was not just a temporary crisis, but part of a greater spiritual purification. One day, during a large gathering in the original church where Mary had appeared, one of the elders of the community stood before the congregation. The church was packed, filled with both old and new faces, those who had been there from the beginning and those who had recently found their way to the movement. His voice, though gentle, carried the weight of experience and wisdom. "My brothers and sisters," he began, "we have witnessed many trials. We have seen the world shake, and we have felt the weight of the darkness that the Virgin Mary warned us about. But through it all, we have held fast to our faith, and we have seen the power of prayer and the strength that comes from being united." The congregation listened intently, feeling the significance of his words. Many of them had experienced personal struggles, losses, hardships, and fear, but they had also experienced miracles, moments of divine intervention, and an overwhelming sense of peace that only faith could provide. "We were called to prepare," the elder continued, "and we have done so. But this journey is not over. We must remain vigilant. The forces that move in the shadows, as Mary told us, are still at work. Our spiritual battle is ongoing. Yet, we have been given the greatest tools, our prayers, our unity, and our unwavering faith." He paused for a moment, allowing his words to sink in. "The Virgin Mary did not leave us without hope. She promised us that those who stay faithful will be protected, and we have seen this protection in action. But we must continue to walk this path together. We must continue to be the light in the darkness for others, just as Mary is the light for us." The community had grown accustomed to hearing such words, but on this day they resonated even more deeply. There was a sense that they had entered a new phase of their journey. The initial storm had passed, but the lessons it had taught them remained crucial. They had learned that faith was not just about surviving trials, it was about growing stronger through them and helping others do the same. In the weeks that followed, the community shifted its focus toward outreach even more. They began organizing more missions to distant areas, bringing with them the message of the Virgin Mary to places where people had not yet heard it. The misioneros, as they were now called, traveled to both small, remote villages and large cities, spreading hope, faith, and guidance. Some of the missions were met with skepticism, especially in urban areas where spiritual matters were often overshadowed by material concerns. But the misioneros were undeterred. They knew that even the most hardened hearts could be touched by the message of Mary's love and protection. With patience, they spoke to those in need, offering comfort and a path to spiritual renewal. In many places, these efforts bore fruit. New groups of faithful began to form, modeled after the original community. These groups prayed together, supported one another, and helped others find peace and hope. The spirit of the Virgin Mary's message was spreading like wildfire, igniting faith and courage in the hearts of those who had been struggling with doubt and despair. The community's leaders, now more connected than ever with their fellow believers across the country, continued to receive reports of miracles. Families reunited after years of estrangement, people healed from both physical and emotional wounds, and individuals who had been lost in darkness found the light of faith once more. These miracles were not the grand, dramatic spectacles that some might expect, but they were profound signs of God's presence and grace in the lives of those who believed. Back at the original church, the faithful continued their daily prayers. The once small congregation had grown so large that services were now held several times a day to accommodate everyone. People would travel long distances just to spend a few hours in prayer and reflection in the place where the Virgin Mary had appeared. The church had become a sacred pilgrimage site where the faithful could reconnect with the message that had transformed so many lives. And yet, through all of this, the community remained humble. They knew that their mission was not to seek fame or recognition, but to fulfill the task that Mary had given them, to prepare, to pray, and to protect others through their example of faith. They had seen the power of prayer in their own lives, and they wanted others to experience the same. As the years passed, the world around them continued to change. There were still challenges, new storms, both spiritual and physical, but the faithful had learned how to face them. They knew that every trial was an opportunity to strengthen their bond with God and with one another. They had become a beacon of hope, not only for themselves, but for countless others who looked to them for guidance in difficult times. And always at the heart of their journey was the message of the Virgin Mary. It was her words that had set them on this path, her warnings that had awakened them to the spiritual realities at play in the world. But it was also her promise of protection and peace that gave them the strength to continue, even when the road was difficult. One evening, many years after the original appearance of the Virgin Mary, the community gathered once again in the church. It was a quiet night, the air filled with the soft sound of prayers and whispered hymns. As they knelt in devotion, they felt the familiar presence of Mary, as if she were once again among them, guiding and protecting them as she had from the beginning. The trials they had faced were many, but the faith they had built was unshakable. They knew that, no matter what the future held, they would be ready, because they had prepared, they had prayed, and they had remained faithful to the path Mary had laid before them. And so, with hearts full of hope, they continued their journey, knowing that as long as they stayed true to their faith, they would always be under the protection of the Holy Mother, who had promised them that light would always prevail over darkness. Their legacy, rooted in prayer and unwavering faith, would continue for generations to come. And just as the Virgin Mary had appeared to them on that sacred night, her message would remain with them forever, guiding them and all who followed their path toward the light of salvation. As the community continued to grow and evolve over the years, its influence spread far beyond the borders of Mexico. What had started as a small, tight-knit group of believers responding to the Virgin Mary's message had blossomed into a global movement of faith, hope, and renewal. People from various countries and cultures were drawn to the message of spiritual preparation and the call to unwavering faith in the face of life's greatest challenges. The church where the Virgin Mary had appeared remained the heart of this global network of faithful. Pilgrims from all over the world traveled to the site, seeking solace, inspiration, and the spiritual connection that had transformed so many lives. The church had expanded over time to accommodate the growing number of visitors, and yet it maintained the sacred atmosphere of that original night when Mary's presence had first filled the space with light and peace. The leaders of the movement, many of whom had been present on that miraculous night, remained humble stewards of the Virgin Mary's message. They saw themselves not as spiritual authorities, but as guides helping others to discover the power of prayer and the strength of faith. They frequently reminded the community of the core principles Mary had imparted: preparation, prayer, unity, and compassion. In their daily prayers, they often reflected on how far they had come since the Virgin Mary's appearance. They marveled at the countless lives that had been touched, the hearts that had been healed, and the faith that had been reignited, but they also knew that their work was far from over. The spiritual battle Mary had spoken of continued to unfold, and the forces that moved in the shadows remained active in the world. The trials were not finished, and the faithful were called to remain vigilant. As the movement spread internationally, new leaders emerged in different countries, men and women who had been deeply moved by Mary's message and had taken up the mantle of guiding others. In Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Americas, communities of prayer and spiritual preparation were forming. In some places, these groups faced resistance or even persecution as the message of faith and renewal clashed with political or societal forces. But just as the original community had faced trials and persevered, these new groups found strength in their faith and in the shared connection to the Virgin Mary's promise. One of the most inspiring aspects of the movement was how it transcended cultural and national boundaries. The message of the Virgin Mary, though delivered in Mexico, resonated with people from all walks of life. Whether in a bustling city in Asia or a quiet village in Africa, the core of the message remained the same. Faith was the shield against the darkness, and prayer was the path to peace and protection. The shared experiences of spiritual renewal and hope created a bond between these far-flung communities, making the movement truly global. As the movement grew, so did the stories of miracles. There were reports of physical healings, sudden moments of clarity and peace for those in distress, and miraculous resolutions to seemingly impossible situations. Families that had been broken by tragedy found their way back to one another. Communities divided by conflict found common ground through their shared prayers. Time and again, the faithful were reminded that the Virgin Mary's protection was real, and that her promise of peace for those who prepared spiritually was being fulfilled in ways large and small. Back in Mexico, the original church remained a hub of spiritual activity. Each day, people gathered to pray, to reflect, and to support one another. The church had become more than just a place of worship. It was a symbol of the movement's roots, a reminder of where their journey had begun. Though the movement had spread far and wide, the faithful always felt a deep connection to that sacred place. One afternoon, as the community gathered for prayer, a new generation of leaders addressed the congregation. These were younger men and women, many of whom had been children or not yet born on the night of the Virgin Mary's appearance. They had grown up hearing the stories of that miraculous event and had been shaped by the faith and devotion of their parents and grandparents. Now they were stepping into their roles as spiritual guides, determined to carry the movement forward. "We have been given a great gift," one of the young leaders said, her voice filled with emotion. "We have been called to continue the work that began on that holy night. The Virgin Mary entrusted us with her message, and it is our duty to keep that message alive, to share it with the world, and to ensure that future generations are prepared, just as we have been." Her words were met with murmurs of agreement from the congregation. Many of the older members of the community had long known that the younger generation would one day take up the mantle. They had seen these young men and women grow in faith, and they were confident that the movement was in good hands. As the young leader continued to speak, she emphasized the importance of adapting the message to the changing times. "The world is not the same as it was when Mary first appeared," she said. "The challenges we face are different, and yet the solution remains the same. Faith, prayer, and unity. We must continue to stand together, to pray for one another, and to trust in the protection that the Holy Mother has promised us." The congregation nodded in agreement, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. They knew that the journey was ongoing, that new trials would emerge, and that their mission was to remain steadfast in their faith, no matter what the world might bring. The movement, now led by both the older and younger generations working side by side, continued to expand its reach. New technologies allowed the message of the Virgin Mary to reach even more people. Online prayer groups, virtual gatherings, and international conferences became common as believers from around the world connected in ways that had not been possible before. Despite the advancements in technology, the heart of the movement remained the same: prayer, faith, and preparation. The leaders, both young and old, continued to emphasize the importance of daily prayer and spiritual discipline. They reminded the faithful that the trials would continue, but that those who stayed close to God and to Mary would always find refuge. And so, the movement that had begun in a small church in Mexico grew into something far greater than anyone could have imagined. It became a worldwide network of faith, a beacon of hope for those facing the storms of life, and a testament to the power of prayer and unity in the face of darkness. Through it all, the faithful never forgot the words that had started it all: prepare, pray, and trust in the protection of the Virgin Mary. These words, spoken so long ago, remained at the core of their mission. And as long as they continued to live by those words, they knew that no matter what trials came their way, they would always be guided by the light of the Holy Mother, leading them ever closer to the peace and salvation that she had promised. As the years passed, the global movement inspired by the Virgin Mary's message continued to thrive, evolving into an enduring spiritual force that transcended borders, cultures, and generations. The faithful, both old and new, remained committed to the core values that had guided them from the very beginning: unwavering faith, constant prayer, unity, and compassion. What had started in a small, humble church in Mexico had now become a worldwide network of believers, connected by their shared mission and devotion. In every corner of the world, people found solace in the Virgin Mary's words, which had been passed down through generations. Her message of preparation and protection resonated deeply, especially in times of crisis or uncertainty. Whenever there were natural disasters, political upheavals, or personal struggles, those who had embraced the message of the Virgin Mary turned to prayer and found peace. They understood that the spiritual battle Mary had warned them about was ongoing, but they had been given the tools to face it: faith and prayer. The movement's leaders, both the elder generation and the younger ones who had now taken on key roles, continued to emphasize the importance of remaining vigilant. The world was changing rapidly, and with it came new challenges, but the faithful knew that their strength lay in their spiritual preparedness. Regular gatherings, both in person and online, provided the community with opportunities to come together, share their experiences, and support one another. The bonds between members of the movement were strong, and the sense of family extended beyond geographical boundaries. One of the most remarkable aspects of the movement was its ability to adapt to the modern world while remaining true to its spiritual roots. With the advent of new technologies, the community had found innovative ways to reach even more people. Social media platforms, virtual prayer circles, and live-streamed spiritual retreats allowed the message of the Virgin Mary to spread to remote regions and to those who might not have otherwise heard it. The global nature of the movement meant that no matter where someone was, they could connect with other believers and feel the strength of the collective faith. Despite the widespread use of technology, the movement never lost sight of its humble beginnings. The original church in Mexico, where the Virgin Mary had appeared, remained a sacred site for pilgrims from around the world. Each year, thousands traveled to the church to pray, to offer thanks for the protection they had received, and to renew their commitment to the mission that Mary had entrusted to them. For many, the church was not just a place of worship, it was a symbol of hope, faith, and divine guidance. The leaders of the movement also understood the importance of continuing to teach and guide future generations. Schools and spiritual retreats were established to educate young people about the significance of the Virgin Mary's message and to instill in them the values of prayer, compassion, and unity. These programs were designed to nurture the spiritual growth of young believers, ensuring that the movement would continue to flourish for years to come. The youth, inspired by the stories of their elders and the miracles they had witnessed, were eager to take on the responsibility of carrying the message forward. One particularly significant event occurred during a global gathering of the faithful. Leaders from all over the world, along with thousands of followers, gathered at the original church in Mexico to commemorate the anniversary of the Virgin Mary's appearance. The atmosphere was charged with a sense of divine presence, as people from diverse cultures and backgrounds united in prayer, all bound by the same spiritual purpose. During the gathering, one of the younger leaders, now recognized as a rising figure in the movement, delivered a powerful speech that resonated deeply with those in attendance. "Today, we stand together as a testament to the power of faith," she began. "What started as a small community has grown into something extraordinary, not because of any one of us, but because of the message we carry, the message of the Virgin Mary. She gave us a gift, a warning, and a promise. And because we listened, because we prepared, we have been able to face the challenges of this world with strength and courage." The crowd listened intently, many of them moved to tears as they reflected on their own journeys of faith and the trials they had overcome. "But our work is not done," the leader continued. "The world continues to face challenges, and we, the faithful, are called to be the light in the darkness. We must continue to pray, to help others, and to spread the message of hope and salvation. The Virgin Mary has shown us the way, and now it is our duty to ensure that this message reaches every corner of the world." Her words were met with resounding applause and affirmation from the crowd. There was a palpable sense of unity and purpose as the gathering concluded, with a collective prayer for peace and protection. As the movement continued to grow and evolve, it also faced new challenges. In some regions, political and social tensions made it difficult for the faithful to openly practice their beliefs. In others, there was skepticism or indifference toward the message of spiritual preparation. But no matter the obstacles, the leaders and followers of the movement remained steadfast. They knew that the Virgin Mary's message was one of enduring hope, and they were committed to sharing it with the world, no matter the cost. In the years that followed, the movement became a beacon of hope during times of global crisis. Whenever disasters struck or conflicts arose, the faithful responded with prayer and acts of compassion. The misioneros continued to travel to remote and underserved areas, bringing both material and spiritual aid to those in need. Their efforts were not driven by a desire for recognition, but by a deep sense of duty to the mission Mary had given them. As the movement looked to the future, Its leaders focused on ensuring that the message of the Virgin Mary would continue to inspire and guide future generations. They knew that the world would continue to change and that new trials would emerge, but they were confident that as long as they remained true to their faith, they would be able to face anything that came their way. And so, with hearts full of hope and faith, they continued their mission. They prayed, they prepared, and they trusted in the protection and guidance of the Virgin Mary, knowing that her light would always lead them forward. The legacy of that sacred night in Mexico, when the Virgin Mary first appeared, would continue to shine brightly for generations to come. The faithful, now united across the world, carried her message in their hearts, spreading hope, love, and peace wherever they went. And in doing so, they fulfilled the promise that Mary had made to them, that no matter how dark the world became, those who held fast to their faith would always find the light. As the movement carried forward, generation after generation, the legacy of the Virgin Mary's message continued to guide its followers. Communities of faith sprang up in the most unexpected places, each one a testament to the unbreakable spirit of those who believed in the power of prayer and the promises of divine protection. The story of the Virgin Mary's appearance in Mexico had become not just a piece of history, but a living tradition, passed down through families, recounted in gatherings, and celebrated in rituals that blended cultural diversity with spiritual unity. The world, as always, remained unpredictable and at times tumultuous. Political upheavals, environmental disasters, and social unrest continued to test humanity. Yet, those within the movement knew they had been called to a higher purpose, to stand as pillars of strength in the face of adversity. They no longer feared the darkness because they had learned to carry the light within them, the light of faith, hope, and the promise of salvation. One of the most remarkable features of the movement was its adaptability. While rooted in the profound spiritual experience of that original night, it had managed to evolve, always staying relevant to the needs of each new generation. The movement's leaders understood that while the message of the Virgin Mary was timeless, the way it was communicated needed to evolve. They embraced new technologies and methods of outreach, ensuring that even the most isolated individuals could hear the message and be part of the global community. As the movement expanded, a new initiative was born, a network of schools and centers dedicated to teaching the values of compassion, spiritual strength, and prayer. These institutions, scattered across different continents, became places where people could come not only to learn, but also to experience the transformative power of faith. Educators, many of whom had grown up in the movement, shared stories of the Virgin Mary's appearance and taught the younger generation how to navigate the challenges of the world with courage and spiritual resilience. One of the greatest challenges faced by the movement came in the form of global crises that seemed overwhelming. Economic collapses, pandemics, and natural disasters that displaced millions. In these moments, the community's faith was put to the test in ways that mirrored the trials the Virgin Mary had foretold. But just as she had promised, those who held fast to their faith found peace in the midst of chaos. Prayer circles formed rapidly in response to these crises, offering comfort to the suffering and providing practical help where possible. The community's response became a powerful example to the world of the strength that comes from spiritual unity and compassion. The original church in Mexico, where the Virgin Mary had first appeared, remained a place of pilgrimage. Every year, millions continued to visit the sacred site, seeking not only to honor the past, but also to find guidance for the future. The church had grown physically, its walls expanded to accommodate the faithful from all corners of the world, yet the sense of reverence and awe had never diminished. The light that had filled the church on that fateful night seemed to linger, a palpable reminder of Mary's continued presence. During one particularly significant anniversary of the Virgin Mary's appearance, an international gathering of believers was held at the church. Thousands of people arrived, representing a myriad of cultures, languages, and backgrounds. The atmosphere was one of solemnity, but also of profound joy and unity. The Virgin Mary's message had transcended its origins, binding together individuals who might otherwise have had nothing in common but their shared faith. On the final day of the gathering, a special service was held to commemorate not only the past, but the ongoing mission of the movement. It was led by both the elder leaders who had been there from the beginning and the younger generation, now firmly established as stewards of the movement's future. The church was filled to capacity, and outside, large screens broadcast the service to the thousands who couldn't fit inside. A young leader, whose family had been among the earliest followers, stood before the congregation to deliver the closing message. Her voice was calm, but filled with emotion as she spoke. "We stand here today because we have answered a call. The Virgin Mary appeared to us not just to warn us of the trials ahead, but to give us the tools to face them. We are here not because we have never known suffering, but because through suffering we have learned the power of faith. We are here because we have chosen hope, love, and compassion as our path, even when the world has offered us every reason to fear." The crowd was silent, hanging on her every word. "We do not know what the future holds," she continued, "but we do know this. The light that Mary brought into this world still shines. It shines in every act of kindness, in every prayer, and in every heart that refuses to give in to despair. That light is our guide, and as long as we hold on to it, no darkness will ever overcome us." As she spoke, many in the crowd wiped away tears, moved by the reminder of the Virgin Mary's promise and their own commitment to carry it forward. The service concluded with a collective prayer, a moment of profound stillness as thousands of voices joined together. It was a prayer for the world, for those suffering, for those lost, and for the continued strength to meet whatever challenges lay ahead. The gathering ended with a sense of peace and purpose, a renewed commitment to the mission that had begun so many years ago. In the months and years that followed, the movement continued to thrive. Communities across the world, large and small, kept the flame of faith alive. The Virgin Mary's message of preparation and spiritual strength remained at the heart of everything they did. They continued to adapt, to reach out to new generations, and to share the light of hope and faith with a world that still so desperately needed it. Though the trials and tribulations of the world persisted, those within the movement never lost sight of the Virgin Mary's promise. They had been chosen not only to receive her message, but to spread it, to be beacons of light in a dark world. And they fulfilled that calling, generation after generation, confident in the knowledge that they were not alone. No matter what challenges lay ahead, they knew that with prayer, faith, and unity, they would continue to be guided by the light of the Virgin Mary, leading them toward a future of peace, hope, and eternal protection.